If there were a place in the world where you could store and protect the truth, it might be deep in the Rockies, in a field, on a ranch, in a silo, where an American patriot tells you what keeps him awake at night. Now, here is Medal of Honor recipient Drew Dix and words from the Silo. Welcome, folks, to episode 6 of Words from the Silo. And the thing that's been keeping me up all night lately has been as a result of the last couple of episodes we had about the volunteer military versus the draft. And so I want to get into that a little bit, Brad. And I think it's a good subject because we have a draft, but I don't think the politicians will figure out what we're going to do if we have to call the draft up. And I've got a little bit of experience working with draftees, and it's all good. Yeah. And I think we got to talk about it a little bit. So that's what we're getting ready to talk about. And one other thing is we talked about this the warrior ethos in one of the first episodes. And when you talk about the volunteer military, you're talking warrior ethos. You can't just wish it that somebody be a warrior. You got to work at it.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on the warrior ethos quite a bit in the first handful of episodes that we've done, and I think it's obviously as important now as ever. Before we get into all that, I wanted to tell you a little something about, our president from the Center for American Values, Henry Jones, recently came back from Washington, D.C., went on a honor flight. He's part of that honor flight program, and he transports people back and forth to D.C., veterans. And but when he came back this last time, he brought us a little memento that I wanted to show you from the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And it is, well, I'm going to let you look at it. And you can...
Let me see. This is an etching from the Vietnam Wall.
Yep.
And it's Glenn English.
I understand you know Glenn English.
This is a hell of a interesting story. I don't believe in coincidences, but there's some strange things that happen. So I came back from Vietnam. Let me get into this to the audience here. I think you'll find it interesting. Yeah. I came back from Vietnam and bought a little house in a subdivision outside of Fort Bragg. On Badger Court. And 2 doors down, there was a lot of military families there, and was a sergeant, had a couple little kids, and they're age of my kids. And of course, I had just received a Medal of Honor, and Sergeant English was old school, career military. And when I first came back, I realized that through him, actually, that having the Medal of Honor is going to impact my life, because this guy, who was very tough and very confident in his ability, had a difficult time talking with me because I was a Medal of Honor recipient. And I got to know him a little bit. I mean, we didn't serve together, but in the end of the day, we drink a beer together once in a while and watch the kids play. And so he had already been in Vietnam, and he got orders to go back. And he went back as an individual replacement, and it must have been the day after he got into country, Vietnam, and he got in a convoy to go to his unit, armored personnel carrier. And they got ambushed. And at first, we'd heard that he's missing in action. His family and his friends knew he's MIA, right? We didn't know what that meant at first. Well, it meant that he was rescuing other members in that armored personnel carrier that was on fire, and went in several times and dragging wounded out until the last time when it blew up and he couldn't, and he died. So missing in action until they could notify the family of that he was killed. But in doing that, he'd earned the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
And he was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. So when you think about it, someone that was so admired the medal so much, and me for having received that, to go through something and without hesitation risked his life for his soldiers. So he was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. And I thought about that often, because how many times would you be 2 doors down from somebody that to have had the Medal of Honor? And he did. He had the Medal of Honor. He just didn't live to wear it. So that the moral of that story is we got career warriors out there. You never know when you're going to have to do what you got to do. And he did it. So I went back to Vietnam in the 101st after I had a battlefield commission, and now I'm an officer. And his name was Glenn English, and they named a fire base after him, and I went to Fire Base English in the I Corps of Vietnam. So thanks for listening to that story, and for listeners to know that, there's guys out there all the time that are going to, and he didn't do it to get a Medal of Honor. No, I know damn well he didn't. Yeah. The burning vehicle is something you don't want to be jumping into, right?
Yeah.
And
what a hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
That story. Let me take that back from you.
We should put that up in the center somewhere.
We will put that in the center. That's amazing. That gives me chills.
Yeah.
I mean, as you were talking, I can't even fathom that. That's the first time I've heard that too.
Well, and I hadn't thought about it. I told Henry, Henry Jones, our president, he does remarkable work with the honor flight, and he was going up there, and I said, "Hey, look, see if you can find Glenn English on there." And he got it. He got an etching and rubbing, and then I told him that story. He said, "Wow,
that is something else." So for you to go back to Vietnam as a Medal of Honor recipient, can you give us some insight in how you even accomplished that? Because I understand that wasn't something that happened.
No, Brad. Here I am in Special Forces, and I was starting to feel some pushback going on dangerous missions with the Medal of Honor, and I think I told you before that when I found out our team wasn't getting selected to do a couple of missions just because their team leader was a Medal of Honor recipient, didn't want him killed or captured. And, well, I don't want to be killed or captured either, but I want to go, on the job. But anyway, so I'm trying to figure out what to do, and so I got this assignment down in Panama where there was some action down there, and I'm going to go with the 8th Special Forces Group down there, and I had a language skill for Spanish at the time, and so I went by my old boss, the gunfighter. Well, you met the gunfighter.
Yes, I have.
He was the 18th Airborne Corps commander. Anybody that doesn't know, that's 3 stars, and ran roughly 3 divisions at different locations, 82nd, 101st, and the 9th. But anyway, I said goodbye to him, said I'm going to Panama. He said, "Well, Drew, why in the hell are you going to Panama?" I said, "Well, gunfighter, they won't let me go back to Vietnam. I'm going to go as close to some kind of action." Then he says, "You want to go to Vietnam?" I said, yes, sir, but I'm not. I mean, and he said, wait a minute. He got on the phone, called General Westmoreland, and he knew him very well. In fact, one of his, I believe it's his son or son-in-law, was killed as a battalion commander under Hank. I believe that's what it was, when Hank had the 9th Division Regiment in Vietnam.
Okay.
And Hank got shot down and all that stuff. He's a wild man. But anyway, he's talking to General Westmoreland, and he said, General, Drew wants to go back to Vietnam, and they won't let him, and I think it's ridiculous, sir. And I can hear the other side of the conversation. He said, well, Hank, we can do something about it if you really want him to go. He said, well, he covered that's when we had telephones, right? He covered the speaker up, and he said, Drew, when do you want to leave? I said, well, they're picking up our household goods on Friday to go to Panama. And I said, Friday, I guess. And so he said, General, he can leave Friday. Done. Hank says, go home. I'll give you a call with the details, or somebody will call.
So what was your motivation after that to go back? You've told me before that, because your first mission, tell us a little bit about your first mission, how you got pulled off your A team and you didn't get to do what you thought you were going to do originally.
To get back to it a little bit more is I had a Medal of Honor, and I went on the shrimp and peanut circuit a little bit, talking to the local, the mayors and the communities and everything. I didn't really like doing it, but I was convinced that's my role now, to educate the people on what's going on. But when you talk to a group of people, they associate Vietnam with the draftees and all that. And of course, I'm in Special Forces, and they're all career guys and would stay there as long as they had to and didn't think anything of it. But I couldn't answer that question about the draftees. So in those days, Special Forces was much smaller, and there was no career branch for officers. You were just loaned out from infantry, artillery, or another branch, and so you weren't really well thought of within your branch, other than maybe one tour with Special Forces. But if you stayed, they didn't like it because you're not doing anything for that branch. So when I went back to Vietnam, I went as an infantry officer. When Hank he greased it. So I showed up on probably Monday, and Tuesday of that week, I took over a rifle company, and would you believe it, in the same battalion that Hank had in 1966. And so I commanded Alpha Company, the 2nd Battalion 50 Deuce. The attack company was our motto. And, I'll tell you what, I've done a lot of stuff in the military, and just really respect special operators and the missions. And you can't explain how special it is to be entrusted with those special missions. But I tell you what, the greatest privilege, the greatest honor is to be entrusted with the lives of our young men that we drafted and sent over there. Probably of all of my experiences, that's the most memorable and the most honor, that gives me the most honor to have served and led those young men in combat.
I think you've told me before, I could be messing this up, but I remember you saying that when you got there, and the guys you were going to be leading found out you had a Medal of Honor, they were a little apprehensive about you. But before you get into that, what was the story about maybe the Stars and Stripes magazine when you landed? Yeah, tell us that.
That's the whole thing. It was, like I said, that was one of the greatest honors I ever had. It was also my biggest leadership challenge, because young soldiers are, part of why I say nothing's ever bad as you think it might be, it was for those soldiers thinking, because they're all 18 years old. I think I told you the average age of that rifle company was just under 19. And I'm old by then. I'm 28. So they factored my age in there, and it became just under 19. So I take over this rifle company in the field and landed the helicopter. And since it was taking me in there, they also took an opportunity to take in some mail and the Stars and Stripes newspaper, which was the deal then. Everybody looked forward to getting that Stars and Stripes. And so we landed just before dark, and I'm looking for the lieutenants. We didn't have any lieutenants. I'm looking for some of the old sergeants, and there was one kind of old, but he wasn't as old as I was, and all these young kids. And I'm thinking, boy, they're awful quiet, and they're respectful. But I was wondering what's going through their minds. They just lost the platoon sergeant, was an older guy. They had just lost him, and so they were a little bit down about that because they respected him a lot. I understand. Found out later. And I'm wandering around. Okay, it's a lonely job, leadership, because there was nobody. I didn't have anybody to really try to make my own. I had a radio operator and the medic and the forward observer that was kind of our headquarters group, and I'm talking to them, and they're kind of quiet too. I said, what the hell's wrong with you guys? And he handed me the Stars and Stripes newspaper, and the headline was, Medal of Honor recipient takes over rifle company in 101st. And I said, oh my, here it is. On the same helicopter brought me in, because they're always wondering what the old man, they called him, is going to be like, right? Well, here they want to get home. They lost a sergeant and probably had a few other losses. And here a Medal of Honor recipient is coming in, taking over, and I've already got them lined up and how to look for the defensive for that night and all that. So I'm getting orders and stuff lined up. So they're thinking, oh, he's going to get us all killed, He wants another Medal of Honor. One of the guys said that. And I said, I said, I got to fix this to myself. And it's up to me to get them to trust me. And the first thing I said that night is I said, no more digging in night defensive positions. They were horrified with that because they dug in and ready to fight, to attack. And they said, what do you mean? We always send in our night defensive positions so the artillery can avoid where they are and hit the enemy for interdiction fires. And I said, well, no more. Well, they were starting to push back a little bit. And I said, wait here. So I'm having this is kind of a discussion with these young guys, right? And I didn't have a lieutenant platoon leader. There were 3 platoons. And I took over the rifle company when they were all together. We were never together again. We were spread out. And I took turns being with different platoons so I could train them. They didn't know much. That doesn't mean I didn't respect them, because I learned to really respect them a lot. So I said, you guys listen up. And they're listening around. So I leave the perimeter. The jungle's really thick right there. And I go out not more than 20, 30 meters maybe, which is a long way in a jungle. And I took my steel helmet, threw it on the ground, took the entrenching tools, it's a little shovel, and dig. And then, I started then I realized, whoop, I'm walking back into the perimeter. So if they didn't like me or something, they could, but anyway, I got back in the perimeter, And I said, guys, come over here. What did I do? Well, you left the perimeter. What did I do? And they didn't know what I was getting at. So finally, one of the young, brilliant guys said, well, you dropped your steel helmet. Okay. What else did I do? Another guy says, well, you were digging. My point, if they're out there and they hear you digging, they know where you are. So we're doing ambushes every night. No in night defensive positions. We're doing ambushes. And so that first night, battalion called on the radio to my radio operator, secure radio. They could talk in the clear, but it was jammed. You could coded, and they want to know where my night defensive positions were because they're supposed to have them. And I says, we have none. We're in all ambush. So give them our ambush sites. We had about 15 ambush sites sitting around out there. Okay. And that next morning, they all come in, and I said, okay, now we're going to leave here, go down the trail, or not the trail, but down to a new location. And we're going to get a little rest for the night, for the day. We're not going to stay there very long, but just get a little rest. And those of you haven't figured out, when you're on ambush, some awake, some sleep, whatever. So you know who that was. You get caught up. And the mission is not to be there that night. Never at the same place twice. Or you'll get on, that's one thing that'll put you on my list. And they were sure that I was trying to get them all killed at that point. But my idea is my experience from before, my job was to capture the enemy. And I'd get close to the units, and we'd capture them because we could hear them. And so I only used what I learned and reversed the role a little bit. And it turned out to be very, very successful. Those guys, after about the third or fourth night, and they could set up a mechanical ambush as good as anybody. These young 18-year-old mechanical ambush. With a battery that powers a radio, some wire, some spoons. You trip the wire, the spoon pulls the connection away, and the two wires blows up a Claymore mine. And they were good at it. I don't know where they learned that. I didn't have to teach them that. They already knew it. Every night they'd put out their mechanical ambushes. And about the fourth night, and they were settling in a little bit. They felt pretty good that they were in an ambush position. If the enemy came to probe their unit because they'd heard us, they could take care of them, right? And so I'm back there in you got to picture this. It's very heavily wooded jungle. You can't see this far. And we walked up. We didn't follow trails, but we walked out in an opening to a trail that was about 4 feet wide, like a highway. And I said, okay, this is what we want. What do you mean? They said they were nervous. And I said, come on back. Let's get back about 50 yards is all. I want a machine gun here and 2 or 3 guys right here. And so we're back there. Nobody. They're really quiet. These guys know how to move around and not make a lot of noise. And all of a sudden, I heard my radio operator, whispering on the radio. And I get up close to him, and it's the OP up there, operation point. Said they see 3 enemy soldiers walking down this trail. They had just passed them. And they're walking back. What do we do? And I didn't get on the radio. I said, shoot them! But they did. And when they killed 2 and 1 ran away, when they saw that guy run away, they said, man, we can do this. And at that point, they had it dialed in. And so I didn't worry about it. So I went to the next platoon, traveled with that one, and it was all about teaching them stuff they didn't know, that they didn't get in basic training, the 10 weeks or whatever they had before they come over.
That's the first time I've heard that one.
And I today every old veteran I see, I look and I wonder if that's one of my guys, but I've never run into any of them because we didn't go as a unit. We went over as replacements, and because there were a lot of casualties, and but I had to say, like I told the police forum the other day, that we didn't have many, but I lost a few, and one is too many. But you always wonder whether you could have done something different. But it's war, and war is bad, and they're trying to kill you, and you got to kill them, and that's what we did. And we had a pretty good success rate out there. Yeah. And so that's using draftees that didn't know much. And let's face it, if we get into a big war someday, we're going to have a conscript army of some kind. There are people that say, oh, no, we could do it with what we have. There's no way, especially if we've got multiple fronts in our Army. I'm just talking Army now. I mean, we got a good, wonderful Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, but they're not on the ground, and the Army is too. And we have under 500,000. That's not a lot. It's not a lot when it takes several to field a unit, and you have replacements. And out of 500,000, you got people coming and going and different issues. So we're going to have to, if we get in a big war, we're going to have to draft again, and I'm convinced of it. That leads us into this episode, the volunteer military versus a draft. And I don't think it's either or. I think it's both.
Both.
That's what I think.
Yeah. You said when there was a draft, in your experience, the volunteers were typically just the officers, and then is that what you?
Well, let's go back in time. There's always been a conscripted military to meet the needs of the country, starting in the Civil War, right? Mm-hmm. And then every time we had a war, we'd find a way to recruit our draftees or a draft. And in Vietnam, and before Vietnam, we had a draft, right? We were drafting. Like when I went in, I wasn't drafted because I wasn't old enough to be drafted. I was 17. But I went to basic training with draftees. Mm-hmm. And you've got to have both. So if you can figure out the scenario where I had a rifle company I took over, there weren't many senior NCOs, no officers. There was a shortage of lieutenants. I ended up getting some when they started losing, units winding down. I'd got some lieutenants. But so I'm the cadre of this draft force, this rifle company. So I'm training them, I'm motivating them, I'm explaining how it is and how it was in combat and what they're expected of and what their abilities are, and that's all leadership is. Leadership is basically convincing somebody to do something they don't want to do. Now, a draftee doesn't want to. A lot of times they don't want to be in the military, so you've got to convince them to be cold, wet, tired, hungry, and miserable, and all that, and kill the enemy. The core of I'm going to speak to Army mainly, but it'd be the same in the Marine Corps and in other services. You have to have a core of experience to bridge that gap between wars, basically between wars. And if you don't have that, then you've got a problem. And if you don't have it set up to handle the influx of a conscripted military that you need to fight a multi-front war, we got a big problem. Technology is wonderful, and I'm a believer in technology, but you can't rely on it totally. Mm-hmm. You still got to have 2 feet on the ground somewhere. And we were talking about with one of your guys here about technology can be countered with some other technology really fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like you see pictures of the Russian convoys, they're protecting from drone attacks from the Ukrainian. They're building cages around these vehicles. Somebody built those cages.
Yeah.
You know, it's not technology right there.
Sure.
So,
what in regards to technology, what do you think some of the negatives are on the reliance? And we've talked about that with GPS or even texting and things like that in today's warfare.
Well, like I said, I'm a lot of times after people, I'm misunderstood a lot, right? People think I'm down on technology. I'd be stupid to be down on technology. It's wonderful. In fact, when I was in Special Forces, the whole world was low tech, kind of. And so high tech was kind of minor stuff. So when we got something high tech, we liked it. But then we got tech moved so fast, it's going faster than we can keep up with it. And you're never going to occupy a country with technology. You're not going to win a war by just, you could, I guess, bomb them into submission, but maybe you run out of bombs or something. I don't know. Somebody may have to occupy. Somebody's going to have to occupy some ground to convince the enemy that you've won. But that's up to the politicians. What I'm looking at now is how is this going to work? Okay, Vietnam was an unpopular war, became that way because it was too long. We could have won it, and that's another topic, anytime. And that doesn't mean nuke them or something. I mean, we got them beat a couple of times. But we didn't give the troops the victory. But because it was unpopular, 1973 was when the last troops came out of Vietnam that we all know about, and that's when the draft was ended. And that's about the time, I guess, when the volunteer military started. Had to be, because there's no draft, so you got a volunteer military. And we missed a chance. We missed an opportunity right there, in my opinion, because you can have, and we've done good since Vietnam. Like Desert Storm was wonderful. I mean, to move entire divisions over there, took over Iraq in about 3 days. Fighting was over. Took them over. Put more than 500,000 troops on the ground over there, I believe. But I don't know if we could do that now. I don't think we can just pack up a whole division or two and go. We might need a division to get a brigade out of here, But that's another issue. But we missed a chance, in my opinion, we could keep the draft, and we have this really superb, well-trained cadre of military. And we're bringing in draftees to fill the ranks in the units and whatever. And then those that wanted to stay, they got transferred over. Mm-hmm. Maybe even at a different pay scale, right? A recruit scale or whatever. I don't want to get into that, but
sure.
But you can see my point. We got a diversity draft that we're bringing people from all over. Some of them say, "Hey, I like this Army, or I like this Marine Corps. I want to transfer over."
Sure.
Now, people say they didn't draft in the Marine Corps. Bull, they drafted. I had a cousin was drafted in the Marine Corps.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he was drafted. He is, to my Marine friends, I love him, but I always rub him a little bit. He tried to join the Army, and it wouldn't take him, but he got drafted and put in the Marine Corps. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, because Jerry Murphy, he said that he joined the Marine Corps because they didn't want to. He and Jack Krasovic, his buddy, didn't want to go and maybe get drafted in the Army, so they they went to the Marine Corps, and then they were on the battle lines in like however quick they sent them over.
Yeah.
And they were right in the middle of in the thick of it.
Yeah, and my cousin, who finally passed from injuries, it took a long time, but he died, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago maybe. But he was in the Marine Corps, and he was wounded twice. And I think they were coming from Okinawa, the Marines, and I don't think he was on the ground 3 days total in country, wounded twice. First time he was wounded, I was talking to him. He was a hell of a nice guy. He jumped off the helicopter, got wounded. The next helicopter dropping off people, they threw him on, and he left. And the next time he got shot while he's in the helicopter landing, shot in the head or something, and he survived for a long time, many years. But
and this was your cousin?
Yeah, my cousin, and I spent a lot of time with him on the farms in Virginia. But good guy. But that's a funny story, though. We can laugh about it now, but
yeah.
But anyway.
So how do you think a draft would look today with all the softening and different things that go on socially? Can you even see it?
Well, I can see it, but the politicians, it's going to take politicians to get this thing going, but they need to focus on what works instead of what is political energy they can get out of fighting the draft. First of all, we already discussed it. If they're going to have women in combat, they're going to have to draft women, right? And if they draft women, they're going to have to figure out what to do when they get captured or something. It's a whole other issue. I am convinced that most of the people in this country do not want their daughters, the mothers of their kids, little kids, to be in the military, in combat.
Yeah.
I don't think they do.
No, I believe that.
There's a lot of guys that don't want to be in it. So,
I believe that too. I think that's why it would be politically. I think it would be tough for somebody to be a proponent of it because it would be an unpopular thing socially.
Well, look at this, Brad. What if we get into somebody attacks us? What are we going to do?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, give us some perspective on the numbers, because I think that, like, if we say we have 500,000 people right now in the military, in our volunteer military, but what was it looking like during Vietnam? How many millions of military did we have? So there's a perspective on how low our ranks are right now.
Yeah, somebody will call in and probably correct me on this, and I don't know, but I would say that our strength of the Army was about 1.2, somewhere around there.
So we're less than half.
Yeah, and that's what I think. And then our Marine Corps is smaller, too, than it was. But we can do more with less if we're smart about it. But right now we're not doing things. We're getting back in establishing the warfighter ethos and in trimming us down. But let's face it, we've recruited since the 70s to fill the ranks to make people make it like a civilian job. A mistake. I mean, it's never going to be like a civilian job. And we talked a little bit about pushback on our last episode. Within, the government, pushback on these rapid changes, which I think some pushback is expected. It's not appreciated or normal, but it's expected. I mean, you got to expect that somebody will push back. Well, let's talk about the military now. How long have we been developing this peacetime army? 9 to 5, 8 to whatever. Do you know that when you go on to Fort Bragg or whatever, in the mornings, you had to plan how to get on post because the streets were clogged with soldiers were running. totally clogged. It could take you an hour because they're going 5 miles an hour or whatever.
Doing PT.
Doing PT. Well, the last time I was there, I didn't see any. None.
Does technology get people in shape too?
Well, here's the thing. We're just making it warm and fuzzy. And I was doing a little training there with some Studley guys, and brought them to Fort Bragg. And these were good guys, and that mostly in the special operator, paramilitary world. And we were teaching tradecraft and with special operators. So we were going to start it after PT, and we figured we had to get through the gates by 7 something and start at 8. No, 9 o'clock is when the classes started when I was teaching on Fort Bragg. And I said, why so late? Well, everybody does PT on their own.
Okay.
Could we give them that responsibility?
Oh, do it
on their own. So those soldiers living downtown, so okay, we're going to go to the Waffle House, or we went to the Waffle House, and we went to Cracker Barrel and a few other places to have breakfast over this 10-day period. And there were so many soldiers in there in designer PT clothes, eating. And I don't know whether they're eating after PT or before PT. But my guess is they done wash those clothes because they didn't have to. Mm-hmm. And we joked about that. And traffic jam on Fort Bragg no longer 6 o'clock before Reveille, is now 8:30 to 9.
So you believe that we've just lessened the strictness and there's no enforcement and so we're not even in shape. Our ranks are down. We don't have a lot of soldiers, airmen, Marines, and they're not working hard.
Well, we're gonna get some callings on
they
this,
can call.
but because I misunderstood a lot. But I know some real good guys that are doing some fine work and they're in good shape because they did PT on their own because they did so much of it. Yeah. They did it all the time if they were in garrison. But the big units, the 82nd, 101st, I don't know when they do PT. Maybe they do it better in better shape than we were, but I don't think so.
Is there just a confidence that we're not going to get in a situation where we need to be ready? Is that what's going on? Is this think we're going to do it with bombs and technology and not get into a threat?
Yeah, Brad, over the last couple of years, I've been more and more vocal about this. That's why we're doing the podcast now. And I've heard some colonels and generals say, Drew, you just don't understand. Yeah. And I said, I do understand. I do know it. And I had one guy call me. I probably, you might know him, but he called me and says, why don't we get back to teaching people how to fight and kill folks? And if they have someone that can't do the job, get rid of them.
Makes sense.
And if they get pregnant, they're gone. Like in the Women's Army Corps. Now, somebody's going to get all rattled up about this. But I met one of our events, a woman was real proud of being in the Women's Army Corps. And they did their work. Now, we can expand what they do, but let's face it, we're not where we need to be yet.
So you're saying that you're not ignorant to the fact of you're not being old school. And I walked uphill both ways to school in a snowstorm, and this is just your opinion on the fact that preparedness is still important, and we're taking our eye off the ball.
We are, and some of the guys that I used in my instruction of the courses for tradecraft called me and said, Drew, you're right on. We have seen it get so soft. And now we've done this. This is not the soldiers' fault. It's the leaders' fault. Leadership, discipline. Like we said earlier, that a true leader is making somebody do something that they don't want to do.
It's a little disheartening because it's not like we haven't been in wars. We've been in long wars since Desert Storm, and so we have been engaged. So I don't understand how the preparedness has been so lenient.
Well, we hit it on already. We're relying on technology. Technology is going to win the next war. There are people thinking they're going to win the next war with drones. Well, the drones are going to they're here to stay, and they're going to be significant. But I'm not a genius, and I'm not a scientist, but somebody's going to figure out how to neutralize these drones some kind of way.
He who dares wins, and so in kill or be killed, they might be able to neutralize the technology with more of a warrior ethos. We just got to make
Well, Brad, when I went to basic training, and that was a long time ago. We're talking about 60 years ago, right? More than 60.
Yeah.
They used to teach bayonet training. You know what you already said, the spirit of the bayonet. You said it, kill or be killed. Period.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's.
There was times when I was when we did Beyond the Metal with Carl Sitter, and they were at the Chosen Reservoir, and there was a lot of hand-to-hand combat. They didn't want to be in hand-to-hand combat, but if you get in hand-to-hand combat, your preparedness is very intimate at that point, I would assume, and that's coming from I've never been in combat or anything like that, so I wouldn't know.
Well, you want to win, right?
Well, you have to win.
Yeah, we have to win. But in my day, which is a long time ago, and I think even our enemies have changed a little bit. Hopefully, they got a little bit like us, Well,
there you go.
But when they made AK-47s and SKSs, bayonet was permanently attached.
Yeah. M1 Grand. It wasn't permanent on that one.
No, it was part of the.
It was on it.
It was on it. So that's showing what they were thinking. But we're not gonna. I'm gonna say again. I don't have to apologize because I believe what we got going here is we're on the right track. But we have got to figure out how to. We've gotten too soft, and we've substituted hard leadership with giving people, money, more perks. I mean, the laundry list of perks is incredible. You can't keep giving people stuff, or they'll not know how to do without. And there's probably people, I hope there's people much smarter than me sitting around in some think tank somewhere figuring out how we're going to win the next war. But we're not going to do it just with technology. We've also got a mindset. That we can go to war and maybe lose it and come home, like Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What if we go to war and we can't lose it?
Right.
I don't want to get into theories because I'm not a conspiracy person. I only base what I think on vulnerabilities and capabilities. That's the way I've always done it. When I'm tracking enemy down, when we were trying to capture them, I was what our strength was and what their weakness was. I avoid my weakness, capitalize on their weakness.
Yeah, and I'm certain there's enemy types out there that are doing the same thing, assessing us, and it's not hard to look at the way our culture is and the way our softness is, if we want to use that term, to create a vulnerability, because that's certainly vulnerable.
Well, the best thing we got going for us is I think, I know in the Russians, they have some of the same problems that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are.
How big's their military?
I don't remember, but it was smaller than ours at the beginning of the Ukrainian war as far as the army. Maybe comparable. I don't claim to know, but it wasn't huge. It wasn't enough.
Are you surprised that they're struggling? If they're struggling?
I am surprised that we're always surprised that the Russians, we overestimate them. Over the years, we've always overestimated their weaponry and their ability to get it done. They have a conscript army, and they're trying to get them from everywhere. Even their penal system, they're recruiting, and so what kind of soldier do you have there? You might get a couple good ones out of that, but they're there just so they don't have to go stay in jail, maybe, or get killed.
Sure.
But no, that's an interesting subject. So I'm all favor of a draft of some sort. At least dust it off and have a plan that was in selective service to initiate if we have to have a draft. We can't have a draft all of a sudden because we do it because we need them, and then discuss whether we're going to bring women in the draft or what. We can't wait, or I think I need to do it now. I don't think it's a big deal to come up with a plan.
Sure.
Somebody has to make a commitment.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody was to say that they looked at the numbers in the military and said, well, that's not enough to fight a world war. Okay, then the next thing is, okay, so how does the draft work, and when does it implement, and how quickly can we have people on the battlefield?
Yeah.
And that really becomes the math on the situation, I guess.
Well, if you do a little reading about how we were after World War II, because we were done, we didn't want to fight any more wars. We were heavily engaged. And then, 6 years later or something, we were in Korea. We lost a lot of troops waiting to get the rest trained up to go back and fight.
Because it was so close.
Well, we lost a lot of troops because we didn't have a lot of troops trained. We put them into the battle. The Marine Corps took a lot of casualties because they were available. And the Army took a lot too, but it took a while to get everybody trained up. And we did have some allies there, a lot of other countries, but stopped the Chinese. But no, I think that somebody's got to address this draft thing. We're kind of avoiding the issue. We got a draft, right? We kind of do. It's on the books, but they're not enforcing it.
When you say it, do people look at you like, what are you talking about?
Oh, we're never going to have a draft. That'd be unpopular.
Yeah. That's what you hear.
Yeah, and why would we do that? Then there's those people who says we ought to draft everybody that's 18 or something. Well, I don't support that because how many 18-year-olds are there in the United States? What are we going to do with 20 million people or whatever?
Sure.
I don't know how many 18-year-olds there are. Somebody knows, but it's a bunch.
Well, I guess the school of thought would be you weed out the ones that wouldn't be trainable or wouldn't qualify.
Well, the ones that are just overweight.
But it would be a very unpopular thing socially. I don't think anybody would subscribe.
We don't
to
want you because you're too fat.
No, just sending everybody through the process.
No, we don't need to do that, but we do need to be smarter, and we should be more proud of ourselves, and not. I mean, I go to crowded places like once in a while to a mall or see people walking down the street, and I'm thinking, how in the hell could they do anything, on the battlefield?
Sure.
And so if we had a draft, and if you were overweight, you don't get to go, but the others do. They're going to fight for you. I don't think that's right either.
That's essentially what we're protecting. That's what freedom
represents. We're protecting it, but everybody should be willing to do it,
Sure.
I looked at photos of Vietnam. And how about looking at some of those old World War II photos in Korea? They're all skinny guys.
Yeah. That's our diet. That's our food. Our food's a problem. All this fast food's a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem, man. But that's a whole nother issue there. Maybe we ought to do that one.
Yeah.
But I think RFK Jr. is working on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what they come up with.
Yeah.
But
make you healthy so you can get drafted. But
yeah.
but
that'll make people eat Big Macs.
No Big Macs. But you know, we certainly have to get a handle on it, and I don't think I lose sleep because I think we're not capable of winning the next war. I think I lose sleep over the complacency and the mindset of the population. They're willing to let someone else do the work. And my God, when we look at those people coming across the border, they're healthier than we are.
Oh, yeah.
Very healthy.
When they rounded up all those gangsters and sent them to El Salvador, those guys looked like they could handle themselves. There's no doubt.
But I think Bukele is handling them over there in that prison.
Yeah, but they all look like some guys that could fight for sure.
Well, that's their deal. Their ethos, their warrior ethos, is to fight for their gang.
Yeah,
you know, and we've I don't think we're going to solve it, but we did get into the draftees, and again, I have to mention this: of all the things I've done in the military and since, my work with the draftees had been the most memorable. And boy, they could do anything. And there's a few things that set in your mind that you remember on some experiences. Like I said, I was training them everything. I mean, everything. Even when you fill in a canteen cup in water,
okay,
you don't have the handle, and dink, hit the rock, dink. You just hold the cup. Everything. I had to tell them everything. Oh.
Yeah.
And or use a leaf to make we drank a lot of water over there, but to make a funnel,
yeah,
to catch it off the waterfall, the seep, the little things like that. But I remember sitting down on the bottom of one crossing, and as a company commander, I was in front more than I really should be, but I was always wanting to make sure that I could see what needed to be seen through experienced eyes instead of those young guys. But I remember one time, pretty heavily vegetation, jungle. I'm down in a creek with some guys that are getting water. We drank a lot of water, 12 quarts a day.
Oh.
Yeah, 10 to 12. And I looked up, and they're coming down. They're all going to have to come this way to cross and go up. And it just stuck in my brain that they're all carbon copies of each other except in size, but they're young. We have some that might have been 140 pounds, 130 pounds, and some might have been the fullback in football team and weighed 205, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as they were helping each other down, hand over hand, like this, they all were part of that chain. And whether they were the 140-pounder, 130-pounder, or the 205, it wouldn't get to the bottom unless they were all helping each other. And it stuck with me a lot. And what motivated them, I'm not sure. But I would put them against anybody. I really would. All of the movies, some of them in the bad press about the dope and stuff, I didn't see any. It was one time when somebody came back from Thailand on an R&R, and I'd tell them, "No, you all got one chance. That's now. I'm telling you. There is no second chance." And because you're letting your buddy down if you bring anything to the field. And found one guy who brought something back. And I knew it. I could tell.
Yeah.
And so I brought them all out there. And I already knew who had it, but I got up to him, said, I want to see your rucksack. And he says, it's me. So I said, okay, you lost your Spec 4 two-striper. You're now a private. Okay. Yes, sir. After that tour was over, he thanked me for that. Said that was the best experience I ever had, was you doing that. And I said, well, I busted you, but I had nothing reported. Well, who am I going to report it to? Out here in the jungle. He said, you mean I'm still a Spec 4? Yeah, we didn't get paid. Nobody would know.
Yeah. But it worked.
It worked.
That's a good story. That's interesting.
Yeah. But, it was good times. But I think if I could draw a picture of the future of the military, I would say that we have a lot less general officers, hell of a lot less colonels. We had more fighters, more maneuver units, and we'd have a strength a little bit more than we have now. But we would have a plan to say, we got to fight in Europe, we got to fight in Asia at the same time and defend the United States. How many does that take, okay? We've heard people say 1 or 2 war front. Mm-hmm. We'd have a hard time with the 2 war front right now. But I would say that we have to have the conscript army, military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, Marine Corps, all of them already signed up spots that we recruit to. And the ones in there now, we treat them more like a cadre to expand additional divisions or whatever we needed.
Yeah.
We can't just say we're going to win it with what we have. We have to have a plan. Easy to do.
No.
Yeah.
Hopefully someone's working on it.
Well, I hope they are, Brad, because it's important. And why have a Department of Defense with all this, almost $1 trillion, 800 and something billion, and we're short people.
Yeah.
Get rid of the waste and fraud. I don't think we have to get rid of 90,000 soldiers.
No. Got to keep those soldiers.
We got to have them.
All right. Well, that I think that kind of wraps up our time today on this episode. As always, thank you for being here and doing it. And, support us. Go online and like us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you like what you're hearing. If you don't like what you're hearing, let us know so we can take your questions.
Brad, we need that. The ones that don't agree with us, because maybe they've got the answer and it'll help us sleep at night. But I do. I think I know for a fact that we're making a difference. I'm getting more calls, talking to people that they like our podcast, and we're hitting right on the nail on the head on some issues, and we're gonna continue doing this. But if you have a subject that you want us to talk about, we'll address the answer because we're already doing that with every session. But bring it up and let us know at the center, Media Center, or Drew Dick's podcast. We'll address it. And in the meantime, just remember, tolerance is a character flaw.
Just because no one knows doesn't mean it isn't true.